Association of Structural Engineers, also known as IAS Struy, was conceptualized and constituted in the year 2002 by a group of senior professional structural engineers from all over the country. IAS Struy is registered under the Society's Registration Act 21 of 1860. Structural Engineers, also known as IAS Structural Engineers was conceptualized and constituted in the year 2002 by a group of to the professional needs of the structural fraternity. In the short span of 2 decades, association has attained an eminent position in the professional field. Its membership is valued very highly in the profession. Since inception, IAS Struy has been led by eminent structural engineers like late Shri Mahendra Raj, late Shri Kumar Ghosh, Shri Subhash Chand Mehrotra, Professor Mahesh Tandon, Shri Alok Bhaumik and Shri Manoj Mittal as its president. IAS Struy is a permanent member of Engineering Council of India and interacts with the government on professional and policy matters related to civil and structural engineers. To expand its reach, IAS Struy has collaboration with various international professional like-minded associations and institutions. IAS Struy's prime objective is supporting and protecting the profession of structural engineering by upholding professional standards and acting as a mouthpiece for structural engineers in India. IAS Struy endeavor to ensure that its members develop the necessary skill in structural engineering and work to the highest standards by maintaining a commitment to professional ethics and standards. IAS Struy is actively engaged in organizing several continuing professional development (CPD) courses for structural engineers to help them update their knowledge and advance their career paths. It also conducts refresher courses for young and practicing engineers and student-oriented programs. Seminars, workshops, conferences, technical lectures and discussions related to the latest technological advancements and case studies are also organized regularly for members to enable them to continuously update their knowledge and skill set by interacting with the best minds from the industry. IAS Struy's activities are widely appreciated and known for quality technical contents. IAS Struy is also actively engaged in publishing its quarterly journal Structural Engineering Digest (SED), code commentaries, professional guidelines, and a monthly newsletter. IAS Struy's publications are becoming popular with time. IAS Struy has representation in various technical committees of BIS and IRC as well. Its members are actively contributing to National Code of Formulations. In the year 2020, IAS Struy started National Awards competition to stimulate interest in the structural engineering field and to promote innovative thinking and creativity. The awards are presented to the winners in recognition of their outstanding contribution to structural engineering in the categories which include Outstanding Structure, Outstanding Structural Engineer, Outstanding Woman Structural Engineer, Promising Young Structural Engineer, and Best Master's Thesis in Structural Engineering. IAS Struy is currently operating from 4 regional centers, namely Eastern, Western, Northern, and Southern, having its headquarters in Delhi to inculcate the professional culture and provide handholding to the budding engineers. IAS Struy has its student chapters in several leading engineering institutions as well. Of IAS Struy is open to all civil and structural engineers engaged in structural engineering profession. Members are elected based on their qualifications and experience in different grades as per eligibility requirements prescribed in the bylaws. Each application is carefully scrutinized before electing the members. More information about IAS Struy is available on its website www.iastruy.co.in.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is R. Pradeep Kumar. On behalf of the Indian Association of Structural Engineers, I warmly welcome panelists, participants on the Zoom platform, and also on YouTube to the panel discussion on Turkey earthquake lessons for India. So on February 6th, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake hit Turkey. And within 9 hours on the same day, another earthquake of magnitude 7.5 hit the nearby area. The focal depth of the first event was 30 kilometers, whereas the second event occurred at a much shallower depth of 10 kilometers. It means that the region has shaken up by a huge amount of energy. So both these earthquakes resulted in over 50,000 casualties and innumerable property loss. Also, it was noticed that peak ground acceleration was very high, that is over 1 G for a period range up to 1.5 seconds. And in some places, it is recorded as high as 1.8 G. This may be because of near fault region ground motion. So in India too, as many people know very well, that we have about 250 cities in the Indo-Gangetic belt. And most of these buildings in the region come under near fault zone. So to learn from Turkey earthquake, IAS Struy, a vibrant professional society in the country, focusing on structural engineering needs of the country, is organizing this panel discussion on Turkey earthquake lessons for India. So let me first introduce panelists. So panelists are Professor Alp Caner from MITU, Middle East Technical University, Turkey, and Shri Kamal Kishore, Member Secretary, NDMA, Professor Raghukant, IIT Madras, Professor Mahesh Tandon, Tandon Consultants Private Limited, Professor CVR Murthy, IIT Madras, and Ms. Sangeeta Vij, and President Shri Manoj Mittal and Shri Alok Bhaumik, and I will be serving as moderator. So let me give some brief introduction about panelists. Professor Alp Caner is a professor of Middle East Technical University and a consultant engineer who specializes in the analysis, design, and assessment and retrofitting of bridges. His designs not only include long span bridges, but also other transportation structures such as tunnels. He has also worked on a couple of buildings in nearshore structures. He is very well experienced in steel, concrete, and pre-stressed concrete analysis and design. He has been involved in testing of structural systems and bridge inspections. He leads an AI-based watch and detect software. And our second panelist, that is Shri Kamal Kishore. He is Member Secretary of National Disaster Management Authority, Government of India. He has worked on disaster risk reduction and recovery issues for over 22 years at local, national, regional, and global levels. Prior to joining NDMA, he worked at UNDP for about 13 years in New Delhi, Geneva, and New York. Now coming to Professor Mahesh Tandon, which we all very well know, but still I would like to briefly tell about him. He is a MD of Tandon Consultants Private Limited and a guest professor at IIT Gandhinagar. He is an international expert in the field of structural engineering, and he served as president of IAS Struy, and presently is a GC member of IAS Struy. Now, another very well-known figure in the field of earthquake engineering, Professor CVR Murthy from Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Madras, and his main research interests are nonlinear seismic behavior of structures, displacement-based earthquake-resistant design of buildings, bridges, and seismic design codes. Presently, he is chairman of CD 39 Earthquake Engineering Sectional Committee. And Ms. Sangeeta Vij, another vibrant woman with over 40 years of experience in infrastructure construction industry in senior management roles. She completed her civil engineering degree with honors from Delhi College of Engineering. So she is managing partner in SD Engineering Consultants. And next is Professor Raghukant from IIT Madras. So his primary R&D interests are structural dynamics, random vibration, machine learning, steel structures, earthquake engineering and engineering seismology. Now coming to Shri Manoj Mittal is presently President of IAS Struy. He is an accomplished civil and structural engineering consultant. He is also affiliated to School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, as a visiting faculty. Now, Shri Alok Bhaumik is immediate past president of IAS Struy, and he has professional development and technical event. He is a chairman of Professional Development and Technical Events Committee. He is a managing director of BS Engineering Consultants Private Limited. And lastly, I will be serving as moderator. I am presently director of Central Building Research Institute, that is CBRI. Yeah. So now to start this event, I request President Shri Manoj Mittal ji to give his presidential address.
Thank you, Dr. Pradeep Kumar. Good afternoon, everyone. I am very happy that today we shall be discussing a very important issue related to earthquake safety of structures in view of recent devastating earthquake in Turkey. I am thankful to Professor R. Pradeep Kumar for taking this initiative, and I welcome all speakers, panelists, and participants. It is heartening to note that we have today around 2,000 registrations for this event. Recent earthquake in Turkey was one of the most devastating earthquakes in the recent past. As per media reports, there were more than 50,000 casualties and damage to hundreds of thousands of structures. Even the government has identified more than 2,500 structures to be demolished. As I understand, building codes in Turkey were updated and revised soon after 1999 earthquake. So what was the reason for such a widespread damage? Probably non-compliance of codes. I don't want to say more about Turkey earthquake as we have an expert speaker, Dr. Alp from Turkey, who will be speaking on it in details. However, we in India have also witnessed several earthquakes in recent past like Latur, Bhuj, Jabalpur. Bhuj earthquake was probably the turning point. Several codes have been revised, updated, or new code formulated. National Building Code was also revised in 2002 and then in 2016. Since then, building bylaws of all major local bodies have also been revised. Proof checking and third-party check has also been made mandatory at several places in several authorities in several departments. We also have disaster management infrastructure in place. Despite this, can we say that we are safe now? Are we prepared to handle the Turkey-like earthquake? Are our new structures earthquake resistant or code compliant? What about old existing structures? Are they safe? Can we make them safe? Do we have enough data or capacity to make them safe? Is public in general aware about real threat of earthquake induced damages? In my view, answer to most of these questions is no. Earthquake causes distress and collapse of structures, loss of property, loss of human lives, and also other psychological and societal issues. Each earthquake has long-lasting impact. No doubt, it is a very complex issue, and it needs to be handled comprehensively and seriously. We engineers have a major role to play in this regard. In my view, major challenges are quality standards of engineering graduates. Probably UGC, AICT institutions and universities have to take a call on this. Effective regulatory mechanism of engineering profession. We do not have any Engineers Act of Engineers Bill. Our profession is not regulated. So Government of India has to take a call on it. Then competence-based registration and licensing of engineers. At present, we hardly have any competence-based registration licensing. Most of the time, we depend upon qualification and experience, which may or may not be the relevant. So again, government and local bodies have to take a call on it. Capacity building, it is needed, and probably professional bodies like IAS Struy can do a lot in this, and we are already doing a lot of activities in this direction. Probably other major professional institutions like Institution of Engineers can also do more in this regard. Then development of code commentaries and explanatory handbooks. This is needed to increase the code compliance. And codes are becoming more and more complex with the time. So we need to have these kind of commentaries and handbooks. And then promoting and ensuring ethical professional practice by engineers. And this is also very important because you have all standards and everything. Still, if you do not even engineers do not do ethical professional practice, then again, everything will be doldrum. So I think again, the probably professional bodies can do play a larger role in this aspect. And then identifying high risk structures, undertaking a structural audit, retrofitting in a phased manner, increasing earthquake literacy of architects and general public, conducting regular earthquake drills like we do in many other countries. So work on some of these aspects is already in progress, but I believe we need to work faster and with much more commitment in mission mode manner. Piecemeal steps will not work. Today, we have very experienced and knowledgeable panelists from diverse backgrounds to discuss all such issues. I will be very happy if the outcome of today's deliberations can be translated into some form of policy for time-bound action. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, let me give a brief on how we are going to conduct this panel discussion. So first, we will have a presentation for about 20 minutes by Professor Alp Janer. And then after that, Shri Kamal Kishore, Professor Raghu Khan, Professor Mahesh Tandon, Professor CVR Murthy, and Ms. Sangeeta Vij. So they'll speak on various aspects, okay, particularly on the earthquake and also related to the country for about 5-6 minutes. And then we'll open it up for question answer session. So I request all the participants to type their questions in question answer window. So after all the panelists speak, I'll take up questions and point out to the panelists for their response. So now much awaited presentation by Professor Alp Janer. So over to you, Professor Alp.
Thank you for having me for this event. And I'd like to thank to Indian Association of Structural Engineers and the President Pradeep to you and Alok for inviting me for this event. I hope you can see my screen at the moment. I think yes. And so the thing is like, I'm going to talk about the Turkish earthquake happened in recently. And I've been to the area for many times. And I'm just going to mention a little bit about what is happening, why this earthquake happened. And what we have is the African plate and the Arabian plate and the Anatolian plate. And this is kind of at the intersection point. And that's the reason I believe we have a storm of earthquakes. And when I look to India, the India has also a large fault line that can be a problem in the future for sure. And so when we look to this area, like as you mentioned, we had two major earthquakes, independent earthquakes. It is not like a post-earthquake. And the region is basically like 200 kilometers wide, the affected region, and 700 kilometers long. This is a very large area. And just after the earthquake, 11 cities are at emergency state, basically. So it is not at a single point. Before, in 2 or 3 years ago, we had earthquakes magnitude of 6.5 or around that number, but they are at local regions. So that is the huge difference. So the unique thing about this earthquake is we had two major earthquakes within 9 hours, and all their magnitude is larger than 7.5. And the thing is, are we ready for this earthquake as Turkey? The answer is no, obviously. And one of the uniqueness is like we have too many soil-related problems. Like they cause a considerable damage. So if you are in a soft soil, we have seen many damages, and also maybe due to the two earthquakes happening at the same time, the design spectra curves has underestimated this earthquake storm, and the new buildings designed based on new performance analysis has also been collapsed, and maybe due to some I'm going to explain at later stages. But in the development of this Turkish earthquake design course, it started in 1947, and there are 10 different versions. And I believe in the next years, we will have an 11th one, because of we learned something, and I think things will change in Turkey for sure. And the current Turkish design code is based on performance, and what we say is it can stay in elastic limit state, or minimum damage, or repairable damage, or life safety. And this is just shows the state of the structures. But what we have seen is like there's a collapse, but next to the collapse there's a structure with some perhaps repairable damage. So it shows that not only soil, but it also shows that the construction technique is important, how it is done. And when we come back to recorded data, we have seen that the response spectra curves are different than estimated, basically. Like when we look into the seismic design curves, this is a typical seismic design curve. Typically, we have been underestimating this descending part, the long period part. And before, it was like 1/t to the power 0.8 in the building cones, but for some reason, this new one we eliminated, we go a little bit unsafe. That was one problem, I think, happening. And then in bridges, we were always using 1/t to the power 0.67. So this is the thing that we have observed, like the 1/t equation should be reconsidered again, like for Turkey. And the main reasons for buildings suffering damage is written in our codes. Like there are several irregularities and the structures that is those irregularities, like it can be vertical or planned due to the architectural, they suffered. And the thing is, the architectural part has to consider also the seismic zone, and the architect shouldn't decide on itself on the form of the structure. They can draw, yes, they can be aesthetically nice, but if it doesn't fit to the area, then it shouldn't be built. So and also some of the locations are just on the fault line. Like in Turkey, we have seen like 8 meters, 10 meters or more movement on the ground, basically. And if the structures are on the slope, they had a big problem as well. Also, the poor construction, like typically people like to use aggregates from the river. So those aggregates are round, they don't have much corners. They're not crushed rock or something like that. So that also caused problem. And also some reinforcement details we found is not proper for sure. So we had and lack of shear walls. Like what we have seen is this, that if the structure has some shear walls, it has a chance of surviving. If it doesn't, then there's a good chance that it will collapse. And then having any type of irregularity, like vertical or in plan, is comes with a cost. And the ground slope, soil conditions, like if you are in a soft soil condition, it doesn't work, and so on. So this is just a picture from Adıyaman. Like on the second day I was in Adıyaman, which was affected a lot from these two earthquakes. It is almost at the east and to the middle of the area. And then I went many places later on. And this is just after the February 7th. This is like a shopping center, and it looks nice. Probably it is on rock, and it has some, even if it has some irregularities, the structure survived for sure. So there are some success stories as well. And this is like a small, tiny bridge with some, and this also survived. And then when I come close to the city, you can see some facade falling off the structure. The structure system is there. And later on, you see that there are three similar structures, and three similar structures has damages at the lower floors. Perhaps the pictures are not well, but the middle one suffered a lot. They didn't pound, but it probably has the same workmanship or same material or something is different. And for some reason, the third one, the middle one, suffered the earthquake more than the two others. And of course, this is a collapse. Like this is the second day when I was there. So people are looking for their loved ones underneath the rubbles. And also this is the case, like you see a structure here collapsed, and then there's a standing one next to it, and there's another one here. So it shows to us that if the soil is the same, then this structure is missing something. I don't know what it is because it is a rubble. We cannot tell more about it. And that's all. And there's like a one-story structure survived, and there's a five-story structure just collapsed. And then you can see the column here, which is on the horizontal direction. And of course, there's also some structures close to each other. So there's no what we call a seismic gap. This part has been collapsed, but pounded the other one, which is a safe structure, I guess. So the problem is pounding damaged the other structure while the other one is collapsing. And of course, historical buildings has also suffered. Like it was like a temple, and this temple has been suffered the earthquake. It's a stone structure. And when it comes to, okay, this is from Gölbaşı, where there was also very snow and cold around. This is just a small village next to a lake, but just one-story structures. But again, you see many problems with it. And this is the situation of the road. Like the soil has just taken another shape. Basically, this is a road, supposed to be a road, but then the earthquake just soil liquefaction and so on has caused this problem. And this is the tunnel structure. This is close to the fault line. It is 2017, the construction day. You see nothing here, but then all of a sudden you see the concrete falling inside of the structure, basically. Like it started, all this rubble is come out of the walls. And this is the first time I've seen a tunnel suffering, and there's one tunnel closed. There's a railway tunnel close to the traffic at the moment. It collapsed due to the seismic event. And this tunnels having seismic damages is very rare event, but it happened, basically. So this, and the highway department just opened this one. The twin one was closed. There are two tunnels. The twin one was closed. So probably they are going to repair the other one and close this one after the earthquake. And then when I look to overall bridge performance, like in the area, there are about 1,000 bridges. Only 15 has been affected, and 50% returned to traffic within 24 hours. And one bridge collapsed due to falling off rocks. It is just a coincidence, like something fall from the slope and hit to the deck of the bridge and collapse. And the other one has a soil liquefaction problem, but there's no loss of life, basically. And the reason the bridges didn't affect much compared to the buildings is they have something that can move, like they have bearings, joints, or some kind of an old technique like a cold joint that can move and didn't cause the bridge to collapse. And this is a soil liquefaction case, like probably you've seen from the TV that there are many buildings that just rigidly moved, and this is just the one bridge that has been exposed to soil liquefaction, and the road has been also collapsed, basically. And this bridge, Toma Bridge, is a unique one, basically, and it carries the rail and the highway on the same line, and there's a second bridge, a new one, and it had a problem with like the joint. The bridge has been designed for in 1980s for like something like 0.3 G, and the bridge is about, for the first earthquake, it is about 180 kilometers away, and for the second one, it is about 100 kilometers away. But these two bridges has been affected by the earthquake for sure. And the problem for railway is you don't want anything on the rail, especially losing ballast. So, but the bridge performed well. And this one is a one-span bridge. Typically, we don't do a seismic analysis for one-span bridges. But what happened is, this is a near-fault bridge. There's an uplift, and then when the bridge landed, it landed on one of the pedestals. So it just cracked one of the beams. And also there's for one other bridge, there's like 30 centimeter of movement that has been measured. And also the rail has banded in that one. And also there are some shear keys between the girders. They've also been affected by this event. And this is like a abutment where there's some concrete falling, basically. Again, this bridge is in good condition. I showed you this before. And there are some little plastic hinging on one bridge, on the highway bridge. And the bridge on the pier on the very left is from a bridge 1940s, and there is no there's a short column here, and I'll just show the picture. It is a arch concrete bridge, but it has no positive connection to the pier, so there was a rocking effect, basically, but the bridge didn't fall. And it is also close to the fault line. It's supposed to fall down, but especially in 1940s, probably people are making some computations for lateral load, but not as huge as this one. But the bridge survived, and now the railway is trying to get this back, basically. And this is from the rescue operations. Like after an earthquake, you need this heavy machine, basically. It's just rubble, and people are trying to get their loved ones out of the rubble. And as a conclusion, I can tell that like this is an unexpected event, and it is I have never seen such a disaster in my life, for sure. And we had two major earthquakes which affected a large area, about 11 cities. And we have seen many soil-related problems due to soil liquefaction. If a structure is next to a river, if a structure is on a soft soil, if a structure is next to a sea, if not properly designed, probably it will collapse in such a huge event. And we have seen that the earthquake design response vector curves has underestimated this earthquake storm. And the new building designs, some of them collapsed, basically. It may be due to underestimation of the curves or some other reasons, we don't know. And it will be cleared in the later on. But for buildings, if the building is lack of shear walls, it will have a less chance of surviving such an event. if the building has a vertical or plan irregularities due to some architectural forms, they will suffer a lot. They may collapse. If the structure is on a slope, it's a negative point. If the poor soil condition is there, it is another negative point. And poor construction, yeah, we can find poor construction in Turkey. There are good constructions and poor constructions. Like I showed you, like the shopping center in Adıyaman didn't suffer, but some other structures did. So the poor construction is just using the natural material. Natural material means like something from the river, taken from the river or sea. And if you are on the near fault, you can't do much. Like, I mean, you shouldn't build a house next to a near fault. And bridges suffered at near fault effects, poor soil conditions. I think the tunnel affected by this near fault thing. And this is what happens. Like, this is the day after, like this is just our dinner. Like somebody just put a fire and everybody is trying to eat something around the cold. And having an earthquake has this problem. Like in big cities, they cut the electricity and the natural gas because they don't want fire to happen. And then this brings many safety problems, basically. People are homeless and living on streets and trying to just burn the things. So it has many aspects, basically. And that's all I want to talk today. And later on, if you have any questions, I will try to answer. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Professor Al. We'll take up the question answers after all the panelists speak. Okay, now we'll move to Professor Raghukant. So I request him to give his views or points on Turkey earthquake and also with reference to India.
Thank you, Professor Ramanacharla. I think a nice presentation. Yes, I think Professor Alp Jenner has made. Now I have just have seen the reports, that strong motion data and the reports for the Turkey earthquake. I have just made some 4 points which we can do immediately for our India. So the first point, I think, when you look at the strong motion data, so obviously, this Turkey earthquake reiterates once again that earthquakes are capable of producing PGS more than 1G in the near field region. Of course, we have observed this type of high PGS in the past earthquakes also. Like in our India, we don't have any record. But if you see the reports of 1897, 1950 Assam earthquakes, clearly it was based on the damage reports, it was shown that PGA was more than 1 times gravity, like boulders was toppling and there was lifting in the air itself. And even the Gujarat earthquake also PGA, we don't have the data, but in the near field from, these boulder toppling and others, it was also more or less close to 0.6 to 0.8 G in the near field region. I think the first point, maybe we have to now start thinking, in designing our at least the important structures, to withstand these type of ground motions, although they may be very rare. But this is the first point which I noted from this Turkey earthquake. Now, the second point is, that the fault ruptures is extremely complex for Turkey earthquake, essentially for the first main shock, And I think recently, Japanese and others, and even USGS has put up this finite fault slip models. They show it's a very complicated geometry. It is not like generally our understanding of fault is like a planar fault kind of thing we assume. But here it is something like 3 or 4 segments of faults branching, and others have been reported here. Now in India also, if you see in Himalayan faults, we are having curved faults, non-planar structures are there. So it will be very interesting, these type of complex, to study these type of complex fault geometry, whether these type of high ground motions are caused due to this non-planar fault geometry, and same thing we are having in Himalayas and Northeast also. So how this will translate, say. So this is a very important point, like effect of fault geometry, say, on ground motion values, whether it will be high or small, whether it has any significant effect. So this is the second point which I noted. Now coming to the third point, essentially, of course, Professor Alp Jenner has also pointed out regarding the spectral shape, at the long periods. Now in India, we are having one spectrum shape itself for the entire country given for type 1, type 2, type 3 soil itself. But of course, as a Turkey earthquake, of course, if you take the entire data and if you normalize to 1G and take the mean value, the spectral shape looks similar. But if you go in the near field regions, only the near field data, if you take it, And I think the Italian report has given, nicely the long period, the amplifications, all those things also. But we see that I think we also have to work out, something like a near field correction factors essentially for the response spectra, especially in the near field region. Essentially, when the structures are very close to faults in Himalayas and Northeast, say, maybe some small correction factors may have to be derived. And of course, we don't have right now the data in India, but I think this has to be worked out maybe in the future. That's what the third point. And my last point, of course, there are several points. And the last important point, when I glanced this earthquake was, like, of course, Professor, I think Alpchandra also pointed out, the tectonic setups of Turkey and Himalayas are entirely different, basically. When you look at the focal mechanism of this Turkey earthquakes, they show more or less a strike slip mechanism was observed here, and little thrust was also observed. Now in India, if you see the faults which are parallel to Himalaya are all thrust faults, but the faults which are perpendicular to Himalayas, so they are all strike slip faults itself. Like for example, we had a 2011 Sikkim earthquake, so that was focal mechanism was strike slip mechanism was reported for that earthquake. And faults below the Indo-Gangetic basins like Mahendranagar, Dehradun fault, I think Moradabad fault, Great Boundary fault, Lucknow fault, Patna faults are there. They are also perpendicular to Himalaya, and they also show the strike slips type of mechanism. But the challenge here is we are having a lot of sediments on the top of this IG basin faults, which show strike slip mechanism activity. So one interesting aspect is, of course, these type of earthquakes are very rare. So we all know that the sediments may amplify or de-amplify these type of extreme ground motions. So it will be interesting how, like taking the same Turkey strong motion data, so maybe for 7.7 or so, that two data, and then we would be interested to see like how this IG basin, like processes this Turkey ground motion data, whether amplification will be there or de-amplification will be there. So this is one interesting aspect I found out from this data. So these are my initial observations about this Turkey data. Maybe as a time process, maybe we'll understand these things in a better detail, and we can translate it into our Indian this one also. So thank you, Professor Pradeep.
Thank you, Professor Raghukant. Now I invite Professor Mahesh Tandon to give his views on geotechnical aspects. Professor Mahesh Tandon.
Yeah. I will just try to see if I can show you one or two slides. Oh, I think let it be. Vikas, are you there? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can share.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Slide is visible.
Yeah. So the Middle East Technical University, to which the professor belongs, they have made an excellent preliminary report. And the geotechnical part.
So 1 second, sir, your video is missing. So if possible, please switch on the camera. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So the geotechnical aspects is what I have been asked to talk about. The METU, which is the Middle East Technical University, to which our first speaker belongs to. I mean, he has given a general idea of the whole thing, and of course he knows much better. But there is a preliminary report, an excellent preliminary report, which is also available on the internet. And in that, whatever one could find from the geotechnical aspects, there is evidence of loss of strength of soil, flow failures, or lateral spreading, which means basically there is liquefaction in the soil at many places, and settlement of some of the buildings are up to 80 centimeters. So in conclusion, what I can say after reading this report, the worst affected are the buildings. And of course, there have been a number of slope failures. What I can call acceptable performance, because I don't think we should expect some great performance of buildings or any of the structures when you're close to the near fault zone. But if you're far away, tunnels have performed reasonably well, except for a few little damages, which is expected. The deep excavated walls, surprisingly, have also performed very well. And this is very good to hear. Mechanically stabilized walls is another one, which is which have performed quite well. So there are successes and failures in the type of structures. I will not get into the type of buildings and all that. I'm only going to talk about the geotechnical aspects. Wherever there was poor soil, the buildings have performed badly. Next one, Vikas. What I want to mention as a suggestion to for the next code of 1893, which is currently under revision in India, is that though 1893 part 1 does not clarify, but the zone factor Z, which we have taken as 0.36, 0.24, 0.16, 0.1 G in zones 5, 4, 3, and 2, respectively, they are at the base rock level under far field conditions. So this we should not forget. But I think the new code should definitely make it very clear as to what these figures are. And of course, we know that now they are going to make, instead of 5 zones, they are going to make it 6 zones, and at least the 0.336 G may go even further higher than that. All this we have heard. But I think that it is very, very beneficial for engineers if we clearly identify what these figures represent, where. That means we are talking about this is at the base rock level. This is not at the ground level. The ground level, in order to be able to find out that, we should give another table which is similar to what FEMA has done in 2009. I don't know whether they made something which is more recent, but this one, it tells you about the class of soil. Now, A and B, these are rocks, and F is the poorest kind of soil with the least shear strength. So, if you can see this, let us take zone 4. You have in rock, if you have, it is the figure can be taken as 1, the multiplication or amplification factor. Whatever A max you decide, whether it is what I have just stated in the current code or in the later code. But if you the soil becomes poorer and poorer, you can see how 1 can become 1.6. There is the amplification factor of whatever you are seeing there. The other important issue is that when you have a lower zone, for example, if you have seismic zone 2, the amplification per se is much larger compared to whatever the Z factor is. So these are some of the things which can be clarified in a simple table like this in the new code that we come to. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now I request Professor CVR Murthy to give brief on built environment. Sir, 6-7 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Pradeep, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We really appreciate the coming of Professor Alp Chenair to this get-together, and where he's sharing the pain and agony that the nation is going through. We are with you, sir, on this, but a couple of thoughts based on what you have presented. The first issue that caught my attention is that near fault effects have dominated in this particular earthquake. Is there any sort of action that you will propose or you're likely to propose to account for near fault effects in the future standards? The reason why I'm asking this is we are also plagued with the same issue. About 4,000 kilometers of our landmass is having near fault effects along the Himalayas and the Northeast and Andaman Nicobar. So we will need to address that also from our side. The second issue that came to attention from what you presented was that the nonlinear analysis based modern technique based designed buildings had not performed well. Maybe I'll request if you could share a little more detail about that. Another aspect that is also growing in India for us is the tunnels. We are building more tunnels across the fault lines, and we wanted to understand a little more about any specific provisions are available for design of tunnels in the standard, or there's not much, but even though they have performed reasonably okay. But I do see a lot of spalling of plain concrete, and which has come from the side, that is okay, but if it is falling on the vehicles, that could be a little worry for us. One clear observation that you had mentioned is that lack of structural walls in these frame buildings. Would you think that that presence of structural walls would have mitigated the losses to a large extent? This is something that we have seen in the other earthquakes also in Mexico, recent earthquakes in Mexico, where flat slab buildings have collapsed and buildings without walls have collapsed in larger numbers than any other buildings. The last point I wanted to sort of raise a thought from you or seek an answer or an input from you is about soil liquefaction. Is there, I see from what I have seen as the soil profiles that you have shown, it seems ocean bottom material. And so is there a way that you can strengthen the foundations of these heavy buildings and structures when you're looking at such marine environment-based soil conditions under these structures? Thank you so much, Professor Chenier.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, now I invite Ms. Sangeeta Vij to share her views on the presentation as well as code compliance in the country.
Thank you, Dr. Pradeep, and thanks to IAS Struy and Professor Chenier for presenting the findings. And as Dr. Murthy said, the whole of India is praying for the survivors and willing to support you in any manner possible. So I would just like to say that the lack of code compliance has come out as the main reason for mass destruction, not only in Turkey, but also in Syria. If we look at the Indian scenario, there is an urgent need to review all existing building structures as per NBC. Our National Building Code in Chapter 2 on administration very clearly spells out that every 3 to 5 years, the buildings, all public buildings higher than 15 meters must be audited, not only for structural safety, actually for fire and electrical safety as well. And local corporations are authorized to seal the facility if non-compliance issues are observed, and they are allowed to open only after a full audit and strengthening has been completed to the satisfaction of the corporations. Commensurate action is missing, and I feel personally that the kitty of seriously non-compliant buildings is increasing. It may be actually in tens of thousands or even more. So I would like to look at the problem areas which have also been highlighted by Professor Chenier. The large cantilevers, the irregular geometries, soft stories, tilts, plan and elevation irregularities, mass irregularities, and torsion irregularities, flat slabs, floating columns, PT slabs, precast construction without verifying the ductility of joints, whether it is compatible with the ductility of a cast in situ joint or not. All this is being done primarily to satisfy certain timelines of important projects. Even major hospitals are being made precast. And in pandemic, I think in Delhi alone or India alone, I think many large hospital and healthcare facilities have come up without adequate number of shear walls. And I feel hospitals, schools, and all public buildings of critical significance like transport and communication infrastructure must be audited and retrofitted to avoid any chaos post-disaster and also to help in mainstreaming the relief activities. I would also like to mention that NDMA had come up with excellent guidelines for hospital safety, which were issued in 2016, focusing on ensuring the earthquake safety, not only in planning logistics, but also other disciplines like electrical, fire, and structural safety. It also spells out clear-cut guidelines for technical audit and retrofit of all existing healthcare facilities. And I think it gives guidelines for all structural systems which are allowed and which are not allowed, most notable being that the focus is on ensuring concrete shear walls in all hospitals, be it steel buildings, be it concrete frame structures, but they have even spelled out the percentage of floor area which is to be used in terms of shear walls in both directions. So the need is there to actually start implementing the guidelines. I think the recommendations also spell out that all critical hospital units have to be designed to immediate occupancy level. And similarly, in tall building code, we recently got it in 2017, but I find the implementation is very poor. Most people, including architects and clients, are largely unaware of the recommendations. And for example, only regular buildings are recommended in high seismic zones like 4 and 5. And slenderness ratio of buildings, aspect ratio, and appropriate geotech investigations and minimum depth of foundation embedment have been clearly spelled out. And we need to use a zone appropriate structural system with a clearly spelled out height limit has been given. Although I find people are unfortunately not aware, and strictly it is not being followed. For example, no moment frame systems are allowed in zone 4 and zone 5. Now imagine, consider 50 meters as the cutoff limit, 50 to 250 meters. We are still happily building beam column buildings, starting from 13 to many higher floors. We are still not following the recommendations. And I think it also clearly says that irregular buildings will be treated as code exceeding buildings and will need to go to ERP panel, expert review panel. And except Mumbai or maybe even Ahmedabad, I don't find any city having a high-rise committee or a expert review panel, which is really necessary. And I think I can't miss the stilted buildings, which collapsed in large numbers in Ahmedabad. And I still see a lot of stilted buildings being designed, being constructed around us in National Capital Region. There may be more than 10,000 buildings with flat slabs, large spans, without capitals, without drops. So the list is pretty long. I can go on, but I would like to stop here and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sangeeta ji. So I think we are doing pretty good in time. So one panelist, Shri Kamal Kishore ji, will join slightly later. So we have nearly 1 hour for question and answers. So what I will do is first take the questions which are raised by the panelists itself. And after that, I'll go to the question and answer window. These questions are directly to Professor Alp. So I'll take a few questions from the panelists. So Professor Alp, first one is there any thinking in Turkey to have a separate code or to include provisions on the buildings in near fault region?
Yes, we do have, like, in the code, it requires, if you are building a structure within 10 kilometers, then they ask for a site-specific ground motion. So you don't use the actual curve, but you do an analysis of all those zones and the fault lines, and then try to estimate a new one based on including the near fault effects. And I can tell that, like, I show 2 bridges, like one of them is built in 1980s and the other one is like recently 2022. And in 1980s, the very first one was designed for a 0.3G PGA. And then the new one has been designed for 0.6 PGA, 2 times more, but they both survived for different reasons.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And the next question is on the flat slab buildings. So like in the region which is shaken up heavily, are all flat slab building collapsed, or are there any outliers? And can you brief on the behavior of flat slab buildings?
Yes, well, typically the structures that has the moment frame or flat slab, like flat slab with columns, are not much good for the earthquake. And what I have seen in this places that I visited, like it was the very first day, people are trying to look for the collapses. They are just digging the rubbles. But then I was paying attention to the other structures that survived, because we have too many earthquakes in the region. And what I have seen is, like, if the structure has some kind of a shear wall, like even a small one or something that can hold, they didn't collapse, but they were about to collapse. Like, the structure doesn't have too many columns, and it is like you said, it can have like a flat slab or some moment frame, a weak moment frame. These structures has a, like, because from the rubble you cannot understand if it's a moment frame or a flat slab, to tell the truth. But the ones that survived, that I can tell, has some kind of a shear wall, or they have. We also in Turkey we have this masonry structures, like it's a like 1 or 2 story masonry structure with some perhaps wooden floors or something like that. So they also survived, some of them didn't. And the ones they didn't, you can't do much, because I show you the condition of the road, and the soil itself is shaking a lot, basically. And as if somebody from space came by and just steered the ground, you know, like you can't do much about it. The structure will not survive such a soil displacement. And so I don't know what collapsed, because they've already been collapsed, like I said, but the ones that did survive is the ones that has the shear walls and so on, basically.
Yeah, Professor Al, the next question is about the structural walls. So in many photographs, so which we saw and many of our colleagues, there were no structural walls. So now 2 questions. One is, like, is there any provision in building code in Turkey for the structural walls? And the second one is, were the structures collapsed constructed long back and not new constructions got affected severely?
Okay, I think, okay, in the code, there's a provision for shear wall. There's a certain requirement. And our code has some penalties, like if you go out of a normal standard design, then you face with some penalties. And there are some percentages for shear walls, like because you can make a moment frame structure or a hybrid structure or dual structure, like where you have shear walls and the moment frame working together, or you can mainly depend on the shear walls. And but the code doesn't tell you exactly what to do on what areas. Eventually, the designers decide on that. And the other thing is the architects in Turkey do not like shear walls. So that is one of the problems.
Global problem.
Yeah, and then also the, like, especially in small cities, small business is always takes the first or the ground floor, and when they have the ground floor, they can cut columns. I mean, because the guy needs to more space for his, I don't know, like car gallery or something like that. So it is very common. Some non-engineers think that the columns are unnecessary, so they cut the column. And of course, the other problem is like this place is close to a we call it a large river, like it is a Mesopotamia area. Think this way, and in Mesopotamia, like the river, there are many rivers, and there's a big one. So when they want to use the natural material from the river, the aggregate doesn't have corners. So, and then your concrete quality drops all of a sudden. And I've seen I've collected some pieces from the collapses, some rubbles. You can easily see that the quality of the concrete is not the perfect one. And of course, the code itself may be the perfect one, but the other thing is like the ground motion has been underestimated. That is one other problem. Like, so even if you design the structure to the design code given by the government, because the government issues the response trajectory curves, like there's an online system, you just type in your coordinates, and then the government says that, okay, this is the official document, the PGA is such and such. But the measured earthquake motion at some locations are higher than the government's response vector curves. That is one other problem. So did I answer all the questions? I was...
Yeah, fine. No, there are two more questions from the panelists, but I'll reserve it slightly later to give you rest, just 2 minutes. Now, I am opening the questions from Q&A chat window. Now, this question is to Professor Raghukant. Raghukant, the question is, like, I'm slightly rephrasing the question. So, in India, are we thinking about site-based response spectrum criteria? Professor Raghukant, you are on mute.
Yes, yes. Now I think you are able to hear.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right now, I think the IS code goes by simplification, type 1, type 2, type 3 itself. But what essentially from this Turkey earthquake, what I think Professor CVR also mentioned, I think Professor Alp Chener also mentioned. So we want to look at the spectrum shape essentially in the near field region. For that, I think we are trying to do this one.
Okay, thank you. The next question is to Professor CVR Murthy. Sir, can you provide an example that clarifies the meaning of 0.5G, some physical examples so that people understand it?
Yeah, so typically when you're looking at design of structures, the weight of the building, and 10% of that you will apply horizontally was the classic thinking way back in 1900s, early 1900s. But with time, what has happened is that the flexibility of the structure reduces some force. And so it makes the structure, the flexible structures attract less force from the earthquake. And that is how they said that we can reduce it further. But all that experience was based on far field. When you really come to near field, accelerations of 1G were noticed in the 1897 Assam earthquake. What it meant is that the stone which is on ground got thrown upwards. And so if you are looking at a building that is built, let's say single-story building just placed on the ground, then with 1G acceleration, it can be thrown upwards. Or in the case of bridges, you will be able to see that the span is getting separated and the bearings and the span are separated out. So the span can be thrown sideways because this vertical acceleration also comes with lateral acceleration. So when you're saying half a G, what is half a G? We are simply saying half the weight of the structure applied horizontally. Now, just to tell you that all of us started with 10% of the weight of the building as design force. But many countries have understood that 10% is insufficient in the near fault region. And so they have increased the value up to 30% for the design of buildings. So 30% of the weight of the building will be the design coefficient, the horizontal direction, if you're looking at high seismic areas. That is the kind of design force that we will be eventually getting to, especially if you're talking about the Himalayan areas on the hills.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question is by Professor O.R. Jaiswal. And Professor Alf, this is for you. Do we have information on buildings and structures which survived the first event but got damaged in the second event? Professor Alp.
Sorry, yes. I missed that. You said in the first earthquake, the structure has been damaged, and then in the second one collapse. Yes, there are cases like that, and also there are cases like we had two big earthquakes, but then following that earthquake, to the north of that region, we had an earthquake of 5.5 or something like that. It is not huge as sevens, but then still the structures collapsed because they've been damaged. And the reason is, I think, some reason is due to the soil. Like what I've seen is this, like if the structure is next to the river, you will see the damage, like either will collapse or will survive, but it is never usable again. But when you go like 2 or 3 kilometers away from that river to a rock site, which I'm almost sure, the same stack of buildings survived, even if they are with the same quality. So I think like having all these earthquakes, of course, you don't have time for recovery, and people are not getting back to their homes. Like it is not like the earthquake happened, now let's get back to our home. It is not the case. Like people are just trying to stay in small houses or like one-story things or containers or tents, and people are not preferring to go to their homes because they never know when the next one will happen. So it is not a place to stay at the moment, for sure.
Okay, Professor. Yeah, thank you. And the next question is to Professor Mahesh Tandon. This is on IRC SP 114. So question by Biplab Adhikari. So the code recommends to use site-specific response spectrum for bridges with individual span length more than 150 meters. Okay. So in zone 4 and zone 5, but in many bridges of that category, site-specific spectrum data is not used. What is restricting designers to use it?
I think it is just a question of taking a shortcut, which can prove disastrous. I mean, the code has mentioned that for a particular reason. that when you have a long span, you should have a site-specific spectra created by a specialist agency. And there are some specialist agencies available in India who can create for you the site-specific spectra, and you use that. And of course, we always make sure that if the results or the recommendations of the site-specific spectra are lower than what is given in the code, then you use the code. So this is something which is which we have to do.
Okay, sir. Thank you. The next question is to Professor Alp. This is question by Dr. G. Rami Reddy. So can you explain why structures designed using performance-based design approach failed?
Yes. The thing is, like, one reason maybe the underestimation of the earthquake. The second reason maybe poor construction. Like, the thing is, like, when we talk about this performance-based design and ductility, it requires too much detailing. Like, there are certain things with, like, you have to do some hooks at certain degrees, and it is labor intensive, the construction itself. So if you miss doing those hooks, because let's say you are erecting a column cage, reinforcement cage, and without hooks, it may take 2 hours. And once you start having banding these hooks to the place, it may take 2 more hours. And also in Turkey, it is important that people promise, like, you purchase a house and you are just waiting to move in, but they tell that the construction will be finished in 6 months. So then the contractors may take risk on that one. Like, they may go in the fast track in construction. They may miss some of the details. Like, the performance-based design requires some detailing that are labor intensive, and the contractor may not choose to do that at some point. And also the material, like, if they are just using some cheap material from river instead of some crushed stone, it is another problem.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Now the next question is to Ms. Sangeeta Vij. So this is by Rais Ahmed. Why not IAS codes are revised? I'm slightly elaborating it more frequently in India.
I think IAS codes are now being revised more frequently, and it will be a new revision is going to come very soon. As Professor Tandon was mentioning, the zoning, the zone coefficients, the way we are calculating our base shear, everything is going to get changed. So be prepared to receive it. And I think you will find a lot of change in the coming code. And you see, the point is that if you start revising the code every year, how many people will be able to actually implement it? Because I find even the 2016 version has still not come into force. Many people, many buildings, many projects are still being designed with the old code, and people do not have a full understanding of the implications. As I said in my small presentation, that it's important to read the code to understand and implement it. I think we are failing in understanding, we are failing in implementation. So खाली revision से कुछ होने वाला नहीं है, उसको समझ के उसको use करें, तभी फायदा है हमें. But we are coming up with a revision very soon, if it makes you happy.
And I think you can add that the commentary of the code is going to be in the code, so that will facilitate understanding.
Yes, sir. But the point is, I would like to say this again, that we are not reading the code. In the foreword to 16700, it clearly says all irregular buildings will be treated as code exceeding buildings and will go to ERP panel. But tell me, how many people are actually doing that? How many clients are aware of this clause, and how many of us are actually following it? कोड में लिखने से बहुत ज्यादा कुछ नहीं होता है unless कि we as structural engineers take it upon us to follow it diligently.
Yeah, thank you. Now, next question is to Professor Raghukant. What is the ratio of vertical to horizontal ground motion? Is there any contribution of foundation of accelerographs? That is one. There is a connected question. In line with the above, as I understand, near field should have low period amplification than long period. Maybe local soil deformation caused long period contents. So can you comment? So
No,
Professor Raghukant.
He's asking about V by H ratio, right?
Yes, yes.
Vertical to H by H ratio. Right now, I think the code says 2/3. You have to take it. And that's what given in the code. But then, of course, as others are mentioning, the new code is coming, especially in the near field region. And essentially in the Himalayas. Of course, Turkey earthquake was a strike slip mechanism. So in strike slip mechanism, generally horizontals will be more than the verticals only. But in our Himalayas, we are having thrust faults, say. So whenever you are having a thrust mechanism, verticals can be more than the horizontals. So now in the revised code, of course, in the near field region, so we are going to propose, higher than 2/3 in the, this low period region itself, and it will be more than 2/3. It is going to have a trilinear kind of a curve, simplified thing which practicing engineers can use. So that is going to come in the new code. Now, other question was, I think, the near field.
Yeah, no, foundation effect on the accelerogram. Foundation of, yes.
I did not understand. Foundation.
No, the foundation of the instrument found on which it is.
Oh, okay, foundation. No, that I think that is, they take care now. I think sophisticated instruments have come up, GPS and others. I think that they will, I think they will ensure it. And if it is, the foundation also has moved, I think we can have these baseline corrections and others. We can do it to remove that from our data itself.
Okay. Yep, thank you. Now the next, I'm combining two questions and asking Professor Alp, this is for you. How was the behavior of base isolated buildings and also industrial structures?
The base isolated structures had almost no problem. Especially the hospitals, like in Turkey, this happened like 5 years ago. If a new hospital is going to be built in a high seismic region, I'm not talking about low seismic region, the seismic isolation become mandatory. So those structures survived the earthquake, and then they've been used immediately after the earthquake. And the other structures, like because the seismic isolation is only at hospitals or at bridges, and the residential buildings do not have seismic isolation, and it is not very common. Now people are talking about to make it mandatory at some point for some residential structures. So it may become a new thing for seismic design. When we look to the industrial structures, I've seen some precast structures, like precast pre-stressed industrial buildings. If the structure, like that structure was under construction, so it wasn't a complete structure, and some part has been collapsed that I've seen. And when it comes to something steel, I didn't see much. Like Turkey is not a steel country, but there are some steel structures for sure. But I didn't see much of a steel damage, to tell the truth. But okay. I didn't pay much attention. I didn't see, because most of the structures are either concrete or reinforced concrete, and so these are the materials that we have problem. The steel has a lighter than concrete, so it has a better, may perform better for sure.
Yep. Thank you, Professor Al. I think there is a saying that you give more and you get more. No? Same thing is happening with me here. I am asking one question, and in turn, I am getting 3 more questions added to this chat window, Q&A window. Now, this next 2 questions are to Professor CVR Murthy. Sir, can we go for flat slabs in zone 5, number 1? And number 2, do we need to do non-linear analysis for all newly designed buildings?
Yeah, so when you look at flat slab buildings, the beams are absent and the slabs act as beams. The slabs are very thin, and so the columns are happily allowed to swing laterally. The stiffer is the horizontal member, the lesser will be the movement of the columns, especially in the elastic region. But when it comes to inelastic behavior, the thin slabs don't function because they crack very quickly. And so the columns become cantilevers and so they collapse. So clearly in high seismic regions, you should not be using flat slabs at all, right? And there are very stringent requirements in the 2016 version of the standard, which asks for 3 conditions to be satisfied if you're using flat slabs. And virtually, you will be mandated to use the vertical structural walls to restrict the lateral deformation of such flat slab buildings. And this should be practiced even in low seismic regions, because flat slabs per se are very poor structural systems. They may have become popular, but not everything that is popular is actually good for us. So we need to recognize that, especially when it deals with the earthquake condition, right? And your second question was on
non-linear analysis, sir.
Non-linear analysis. In a nation where we are still not doing linear analysis correctly, non-linear analysis will be a long walk. Also, you realize that when modern buildings designed with nonlinear analysis have failed in Turkey, what we are saying is that first, we must learn the good parts of configuration, stiffness, strength, ductility, sort that out first, because nonlinear analysis will work only when all these are put in. And then nonlinear analysis can give you an estimate of how the building is or structure is likely to perform during a strong shaking. So I would not recommend at this point of time, where no country teaches the subject of nonlinear analysis, no college teaches the subject of nonlinear analysis in this country, for use in design process. Design process should still use linear analysis that is being taught in all undergraduate programs. And we should use nonlinear for assessing the behavior of the structure under strong shaking. And even that is like antibiotics. You must use in limited measures under the supervision of a qualified physician and only at limited occasions, not everywhere.
Thank you, sir.
So if you allow me to add one line to what Dr. Murthy just said about flat slabs, I think we also need to check the deflection compatibility of these slabs, even if we have structural walls and a flat slab with R is equal to 1, which is very clearly given in the IS 1893 part 1.
Yeah. Thank you. And now the next question is to Professor Raghukan. Clarify whether early warning system and how this early warning system, just rephrasing the question, how this can be used for mitigating risks. Early warning system.
No, early warning system that is used for, I think, forecasting earthquakes basically. So, and of course, as already you know, right, risk and early warning is only just forecast, like, maybe 10 seconds or 2 seconds or 3 seconds, something they are using. But to predict these type of earthquake, I think nothing works, So the simplest thing is better you design your buildings properly by doing site-specific hazard analysis, and then you design. I think that will be the best solution for this.
Okay, thank you. The next question is to Professor Alb. Pranesh Murnal is asking about where the acceleration time histories are available for this Turkey earthquake.
There's a government site, and I can share with you from chat. I believe, I'll share the link from chat. I'll just place the link. It is in Turkish. I don't remember the name, but I'll just type in Turkish and then give you the link for ground motions.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Then the next question is to Professor CVR Murthy. for performance-based design, how feasible is to use composite structures or PBD for composite structures?
Yeah, the method has nothing to do with material. Method is a process of understanding the behavior of structure. So this can be used for any material, masonry, concrete, steel, or a combination of these. But the issue will be that when you combine dissimilar materials, there will be additional issues because they don't have similar strength, stiffness, deformability, ductility. And so you need experimental data to support the particular combination of strength and stiffness and ductility. And that is where we will fail usually because we don't have those nonlinear response inputs that we have to give for all the infinite combinations that practice may have thought about, right? So that is where we will fail all the time, that we will not be able to provide more realistic backbone curves for and the cyclic hysteresis rules for such situations.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I just realized from chat window that there are questions and there are thumbs ups also. Questions are also becoming popular.
Oh.
Yeah. So, the next question is to Ms. Sangeeta Vij. What is the preferred structural type to resist earthquakes? Is tall building better compared to short buildings?
I would say personally, I like shorter buildings better because it has more or rather less problems to solve than a tall building structure. And it has less adverse effect of a poor geometry, which normally comes into play when we are going taller. People tend to use, those open flower-shaped configurations for residential towers. And as you grow taller, obviously you need to control your drift and the overall deflection that you're experiencing. And so much so that sometimes the configuration leads to a situation where the structural engineer is not able to control the earthquake induced shears. And in one of the projects, I recall we had to use I-beams inside concrete beams to take care of the enhanced shear. And other than the earthquake or the collapse probability, a taller building in India would probably need to resolve many, many more issues. Like if it's built of steel, then what happens if it catches fire? How do you fight fire in a taller building, taller than 50 floors? And are you really geared for the traffic chaos that it is likely to create compared to a shorter building? For example, I've just seen a very tall tower come up in Chhatarpur, which is in the middle of very, very heavily congested area. So God forbid if something happens tomorrow, no ambulance, no fire tender will be able to reach that area. So structural systems as spelled out in our codes very clearly tell us that shear wall buildings are better. And NDMA guidelines also say that. So whatever we are designing, let us try to ensure that our shear walls carry at least 75% of the weight shear, and we can use columns wherever necessary because your lift pits or your stairwells or other such utilities will need columns. So I personally feel taller buildings should be always built with dampers, and good that this question has been asked. I feel slowly CED 39 should look at making dampers mandatory for taller structures, and under Make in India campaign, some of our brilliant entrepreneurs should start making dampers in India, especially with lower capacities, so that mid-rise and not so tall buildings can also use dampers.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Now the next question is to both Professor Alp and Professor Murthy. Yeah, this is related to energy dissipating devices. So Professor Alp, how these energy dissipating device, buildings installed with these devices performed. That is first part. And second part, like, can we give this recommendation in India in zone 4 and zone 5? So yeah, Professor, you go first.
Thank you. Yeah, you mean by energy dissipating by dampers, I assume, not seismic isolation, or maybe seismic isolation too. And the thing is, like, they perform well, but there's one case in one of the bridges. There's this damper system, but it has been poorly connected to the system. So the damper just went out. So it is not only placing the damper there, but the connection should be proper enough. Like, somebody should tighten the damper to its position, or when bolting or pinning the damper, it has to be correctly pinned. And unfortunately, in one case, there was some poor construction, and the damper just didn't work because of it did just come out of the connection, not the damper failed. And so the construction, the manufacturing needs to be tested. Like, if you are talking about seismic isolation system or a damper system, it has some requirements. Like, there are some production tests, and then they call performance test as prototype. So as long as we are sure that those methods are the right ones and connected well, they will perform well, for sure.
Okay, so Professor Murthy. Sir, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. On the use of dampers, first off, dampers work on the fact that the two ends of the dampers are having a relative movement. That means the structure should have flexibility. If I have a building and I want to use dampers in that, the floor should move relative to each other. Now, what it seems is that it's going antithesis to the earthquake shaking, where we want stiff structures because we are not able to handle deflections. Because once you allow columns to deflect, then you are eating away on their capacities and so on. So what it turns out is that dampers are very good for wind effects, because the motions are small, and then the damper design also will be small. But large forces that get transmitted during earthquake shaking, and that's what Professor Chenier was also saying, that if you don't connect it well, then this can be detrimental also for us. So right now, I would say, if we can build experience of controlling wind oscillations with dampers, and eventually we will possibly perfect the method of construction of such devices in buildings and structures, and eventually we can even think of, in the meantime, we'll develop more experience of the use of dampers as well as in the design strategies. And then we should be in a better position to consider it as part of our design process for earthquake effects.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so we have another 15 minutes to go before we start the closing formalities. And to participants, I'm telling you and requesting you, I'm already very rich and prosperous with 110 unanswered questions. So I think you may stop. And actually, some are actually copying the question twice also. So please not do that. Now, the next question is to Professor Mahesh Tandon. Like, can we strengthen the pile foundation?
Yes, we can. I mean, it is not the easiest thing to do, but normally what happens is that we put additional piles and connect it to the same pier cap. That is how we strengthen pile foundations. I mean, we don't try to strengthen a single pile per se, but all the piles which are supporting the column, yes, you can put additional piles, connect it with the same pier cap. That is what we normally do. And it has been done in many cases, because the type of foundations which are used most popularly in India are really the cast in situ board piles. And cast in situ board piles have maximum casualty as far as not meeting the requirements is concerned, or it deflects too much or something like that. So in a typical project, for example, which we are handling at the moment, which has got maybe 50 kilometers of viaduct, the number of pile foundations which have failed due to one reason or the other. For example, failure is also that whether the concrete that has been consumed in the pile, whether it matches with what it should or whether it is less. So those also we call failures. So these type of things, I would say about 5% of the thing is the upper limit for these type of foundation failures, and it all happens during construction. So we have to take care of that. And like I said, the only solution is that you put additional piles and connect it to the same pile cap.
Thank you, sir. So the next two questions are to Professor Alp. The first one is, what was the performance of precast RC steel buildings during this earthquake? And the second one is, was there any pounding effect observed during this earthquake?
In our code, we do not recommend precast concrete at high seismic zones, but sometimes there's this industrial structures because of the people are afraid of the connection, basically. And what I've seen is like one precast structure has partially collapsed, but it was under construction. It was not a structure in use. So I saw that a couple of the beams and columns were just on the ground due to the shaking. And yes, the pounding is a big problem. In the presentation, I showed a structure that has been collapsed, but then pounded to the next one, so damaged the adjacent building. So here the problem is this: like, if you want to make a seismic retrofit of your structure, and if there's no seismic gap between the structures, that's a problem. Or I saw, especially in Istanbul, people are afraid in Turkey that Istanbul will have a big earthquake. It's a very populated area, and they are afraid. But I've seen structures like three-story structure adjacent to a six-story structure. And if the six-story structure just collapses on the three-story one, then there's no point of retrofitting the three-story structure. So the pounding is a major problem in Turkey, and especially also in the earthquake before in Malatya. They like this adjacent structures, and the structures who fell down are the corner ones. Like, think that there's a street and there are 10 structures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, and the structures that collapse is 1 and 10, because those guys have no place to support. The others in between, by pounding, can just take some force from each other, but the last ones are the ones who fail, basically. So the pounding really damages structures, and also the ones at the corner are more dangerous than others.
Yep. Thank you, Professor Alp. The next question is to Professor CVR Murthy, and person who asked the name is given as welcome. So I'm slightly rephrasing the question to give a touch. So are open ground story structure or placements welcome in all the seismic zones? If they are welcome, how to increase stiffness without reducing parking area?
Yeah, the solution is already there in the case of IS 1893 part 1 already has a solution. You can keep your parking, but you have to provide structural walls. Okay, it's already 6 years since we have that, 6.5 years. And I think we should just implement that. We did recognize that it is not possible for us to say that all the parking should be sent away. So then we said, how do we best do it? And so based on that, this provision was added that you need to add at least a minimum amount of structural walls. very clearly open ground storage structure should not be built on this earth. There's no doubt about that. It is just that you need to, build very intelligently. For example, this is the Kalidasa story. I have a pen, and this is where Kalidasa sat on the wrong side of the branch and is cutting the head of that branch. That's what we do when you rotate that building 90 degrees and you get it. The bottommost story is the weakest if you remove all walls. So what we are saying is, don't be Kalidasa, or if you want to be Kalidasa, then use reinforced concrete walls to support you, to make sure that the building doesn't become unduly weak at the lowest point where the bending moment is largest, shear force is largest, overturning effects are largest. That is where you need to strengthen that at the bottom story. Now, having said that about bottom story, don't try to push this to the middle of the building or anywhere in the building. Open stories per se are not good for you. That's all we're saying.
So it can be either structural walls or bracings.
Braces. In case of steel structures, you are going to put steel plate structural walls, for which we don't have provisions in India yet. But for braces, we have made provisions right now. But steel plate structural walls also will come in soon. And so in the next edition, you will be able to see provisions with steel walls rather than concrete walls. You can use steel walls in steel buildings.
Yeah, thank you, sir. The next question is to Ms. Sangeeta Madam. So the question reads as, I feel IAS 3920 gives very conservative results. Is there any amendments we can expect in near future regarding ductile detailing?
Ductile detailing में कोई problem नहीं है. IAS 13920 जो भी recommend कर रहा है उसको site implementation has to be made, and I don't see any problem. I have personally gone to the site many times and explained to the bar benders. It is possible to create that 135-degree hook, and everybody is doing it now. So I don't see any problem. And 13920 is also now getting revised. Dr. Murthy can probably spell it out in a better manner. It is coming in a very new avatar, covering broader perspectives. And I think ductility is the key to making concrete, turning it from a very brittle material to a ductile material. If we don't use ductile detailing, we are as good as using OMRF, which is R is equal to 3 or R is equal to 2. So I don't think we should give up on 13920 easily.
Pradeep, can I add a thought here?
Yeah, please add, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it so happens that IAS 456 always asked for 135-degree hooks. It is just that we never read it properly. Okay, we thought that 135-degree hooks are only meant for seismic areas. No, any reinforced concrete structure, 135-degree hooks are required, right? Additional provisions are related to capacity design in IAS 13920, which is seismic related. Because
Yes.
it's a displacement loading, that's why capacity design comes in. But the basic issue of reinforced concrete, where concrete should stay till the end, is going to happen only if you have the 135-degree hooks placed in all concrete structures, irrespective of earthquakes.
And let's not forget, even a single column failing can actually lead to a progressive collapse of your building. And let me also add here that we've audited some structures in Zone 2 or Zone 3 in Bengaluru and Hyderabad region. And I find people are just going on doing gravity designs. They are not considering, even for important buildings like hotels, 5-star hotel properties, which are like large convention centers or something, they happily ignore it. But if you are not doing ductile detailing, you're actually increasing the base shear by at least 60%. So if you consider that, your seismic may govern even in a Zone 2 or a Zone 3. So we must do earthquake resistant design.
So, next, on a lighter note, till now I have not seen any drawing which came to site in that ring is always 135 only. Even the drawing, any drawing without design also. Anyway, now coming to next question. This is by Shri Arvind Jaiswalji. This is to Professor Alp. How was the response of transmission towers and overhead water tanks?
I didn't see much problem with transition towers, to tell the truth. They were there. The only thing is like in the city, since just after the earthquake, they cut the electricity. I've seen some cables snapped off, not the towers, but the main cables carrying the electricity were cut off at some point. So that is a problem. And not to start a fire, the electricity is shut down for the cities, for a couple of cities. So, and I think I saw very few poles on the floor, like not many of them, but if there's a bad soil, it fell down for sure. And for water tanks, like for water tanks, I didn't see much, but there were some silos, and I saw like let's say there are 10 silos, and then perhaps 5 of them failed because they've been built in a different way than the other 5. So especially the area is famous with agriculture, so they are collecting all these things from the land, and then they're storing in those silos, and that's what I've seen. I didn't see a water tank problem, but I may have missed that.
Okay. Are you sharing something, Professor Alp? Somebody shared
No,
their
I'm not
screen.
sharing.
Okay, now, yeah, the next question again to Professor Alp. How was the performance of hospitals during this earthquake?
Okay, the hospitals with seismic isolation had no problem. They were immediately in use. But I think there were some hospitals, especially in the south region, which didn't have the seismic isolation system, and they failed. So that is the bad thing. And the hospitals has to be, the problem is like in that region, in the south region, really we missed the earthquake spectra. Like if you go right now to the official government, and you will see that there's a response trajectory curve, but that response trajectory curve has been exceeded a lot. So the hospital didn't survive. Many things didn't survive. The only things that survive are over-designed structures, basically. Or some people are lucky they are on rock or something like that. But the hospitals with seismic isolation didn't have much problem.
Okay, thank you. The next question, actually, there are 2 questions. So one to Professor Raghukant, and second is to Professor C.R. Murthy. So the first one is there a need to create a zone map which has a high possibility of landslides also? First one. And the second one is in AII, Airports Authority, there is a height limit set by Airport Authority. That is one thing. So can something like this be done for earthquake prone zones, or place on fault line, or land with high possibility of landslides?
Okay.
Interactive map kind of thing. So these are 2 things. So second one is to Professor Murthy. So Raghukant, you go ahead first.
I think the question is about fault lines, right? He's mentioned. So generally, we have the seismotectonic atlas is available. Most of the active faults where they are located, we know approximately some of their locations. Maybe that can be used as a guideline, as for some of the, whether you are in the near field or you are in the far field, say, first cut assessment can be done using those type of seismotectonic maps. And I think another question was on landslide zonation.
Yes, landslide, yes.
I think that is, BMTP, some other people are doing this landslide zonation maps. And there are 2 types are there in landslides. One is earthquake-induced landslides. Whenever there is an earthquake, a landslide, like in 2011 Sikkim earthquake, we have seen in great detail. So that type of study, linking these things to earthquakes, that has to be done. Now, other type of landslides, of course, due to rainfall and other issues are there. I think these earthquake-induced landslides, maybe we have to work it in the Himalaya, how these 2 are interlinked.
Thank you, Murthy sir.
Yeah, the question was about the use, the controlling of the height of structures.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So what happens is that if you are having a nation of engineers who are competent, you can design any height of structures. So there should be no limit on the height of structures. And that is what is practiced in countries with advanced earthquake provisions also, that they are not keeping a limit on that. All they are doing is they're increasing the rigor of the design process and also construction verification process as you go taller. But having said that, I must mention here that all that rigor has helped in some sense, because most of the losses of lives are in the 1 to 5 story, 1 to 3 story, especially tall structures, which are largely masonry type or poorly built reinforced concrete structures. Right. So it is not about the height. It's about the level of engineering that we put in. And so I would say the first thing is that you have engineers who are competent. Second, they go out and practice in a professional environment. Third, the municipal corporations verify safety before implementing or permitting the constructions to happen. Fourth, even during construction, there has to be an inspection, which will tell us that indeed what is put in the design drawing is actually implemented. Construction drawing is implemented. And fifth is every time there's a earthquake like this, we should learn lessons from that and follow that diligently, instead of just looking at it as an academic exercise, but take it seriously. So much loss has happened in Turkey, and we are heart-wrenched to see the losses. At the same time, we must resolve to save the lives of any more people in all countries, especially Turkey and India. I would say that we should not see this kind of a loss again. And that is the hard work that we have to do in the road ahead.
Yep.
Can I add something here, Dr.
Yeah,
Pradeep?
please go ahead.
Having heard Dr. Murthy, I would like to add that table 1 of 16700 actually does give you height limits in different zones for various structural systems. For example, as I said, moment frame is not allowed in zone 4 and 5. No height is mentioned, no height is allowed. And in structural wall systems, the height, maximum height can be 100 meters when the wall is located at the core. And when the structural wall is well distributed, the maximum height is 120. So there are limits prescribed for various structural systems zone-wise. So those details are available in IAS 16700, which is a tall building code. Let's please read our codes and let's implement them.
Yeah, madam, I think there is something more to that question. Let me add that. That is one thing. What you said is perfectly correct. In table 1, it is given. So over and above, actually, building bylaws issued by city, they will have the restrictions of this AII, that is maximum height, which can go in that city, in that zone. So that is what was the question. Okay.
Yeah, no, that is not to be contested.
Yes, yes.
When airports authority says from the landing cone, you don't allow this taller building, that's fair. All I'm saying is, you don't need to put a physical limit on the height of a building. All you need to do is, for the height of the building, what is the best engineering to be done? And that is what is shown in IS 16700, that as you go taller, certain structural systems alone will be valid. For example, in the road ahead, you will see in IS 13920 coming up in its new avatar, for masonry, concrete and steel structures, we are specifying the permissible structural systems as you go from low seismic regions to high seismic regions. So as you go in the lower regions, you can do all the systems, but as you go higher seismic regions, only limited number of structural systems are permitted.
Right.
Thank you.
And in fact, in the table 2, we have a slenderness ratio. So if your floor plate is very narrow, let's say you have only a 10-meter width available for the building or 15 meters width available for the building, then with a structural wall system, you can only go up to a ratio of 8. So that also kind of limits your height. You know, if it's 10 meter wide, you can go up to only 80 meters. You can't go taller than that. So these are some guidelines which are very clear, very lucid, and even aspect ratio has also been given the length to width ratio of the building has also been now, put on record.
Yep, thank you. So I'll be taking last two questions before we conclude the session. So this question is to Professor Alp. That is, the peak ground velocity recorded at some station was the order of 1.5 meter per second, whereas peak ground acceleration was only 0.65 g at the same station. So PGA would rather be a poor indicator of the severity of strong motion. Maybe Professor Raukant, you may also add later. So Professor Alp.
I didn't get the question clearly. Like, can you repeat that again? Like 1.5?
Yeah, the question is what Arjun, Professor Arjun is asking that velocity is 1.85 meter per second at the same site, acceleration is 0.65 g. So is acceleration a poor indicator of the severity?
Yes. The thing is, like it is an unusual case, this earthquake. And what I know is this, like the very first earthquake, they were able to gather some data from stations, but in the second earthquake, some of the stations are malfunctioned. So you cannot see a data. And so we don't have a clear picture now at the moment. They're just correcting some station values, I believe. And it will not be proper for me to tell anything about those recordings. But of course, the PGV, the ground velocity looks very high, like 1.5 looks high to me. And but we know that the region has been exposed to high earthquake motions. That's all I can say. And some of the moments, like probably you've seen that from the TV, like there are some 8 meter or 7 meter displacement unrecovered, like it goes and stays there. So this is also unusual. Not only the those recordings, but it's very hard to tell. Like so, and I don't know where that station is, basically.
Okay. So, Professor Raukant, can you answer in general that?
I have also downloaded that Turkey strong motion data, and we just did the processing. Like, of course, as I think Italian report, international reports also say, so these type of high velocities have been observed in the at the stations which are very located close to the fault. That's what they say. That long period, 5 seconds something was there. So their PGA was, as Arjun mentioned, PGA was low, but PGVs were extremely higher. Maybe I don't know. We just looked at the data. Maybe based on the reports, it may be due to forward directivity or some backward directivity. And of course, regarding the damages, damage is a very we cannot say that PGV is the one which influences the damage. PGA doesn't. So damage is a complicated phenomenon. You have to have several parameters. Like in Japan, also we saw. Like PGS was 3.4 G or 3. The PGS was very high in 2011 Tohoku earthquake, but there was no damage. The reason was root mean square velocity acceleration. Yeah, RMS value was lower. That was the one which told the damage will be less. But damage, I think, with one PGV we cannot quantify. It is we have to have more information. And as rightly mentioned, PGVs, this type of things you will observe very close to the fault. That's what my guess on this data set.
Yeah, thank you. The next question also to Professor Alp. How far this earthquake exceeded the currently used norm in Turkey courts?
Okay. Some of the records, the thing is, it all differs. Like if you are in the short period region or long period region, it makes a difference. And if the soil has this liquefaction problem, like the soil amplification is large, then in that case it can be like more than 3, I guess. Like I didn't look into much to ground motions at that point, but as far as I see, like in terms of scaling, but we really underestimated them. Like at least 2 times or 3 times, especially for the long period region. And some of the peak ground accelerations are much higher than expected. It may be due to these 2 earthquakes happening at the same time. And because it is very unusual thing, like you just one thing happens and then 9 hours later another major one hits. It is not a post earthquake, like it is not a following earthquake on the same fault line, but then we had many of them. So I think that will be my answer.
Okay, thank you. And the last question, sorry about that. Last question to Professor Alp, and also some answer I would request from Professor Murthy also on this one. Is there any specific provision made at the junction or corner of masonry buildings in Turkey to maintain better integral box action in order to prevent failure?
For masonry structures, we have a specification in Turkey, the guidelines, like the Turkish guidelines cover, the seismic guidelines cover the reinforced concrete, the steel, the masonry structure, and we also have something for use of carbon fibers for retrofit and seismic isolation in the system. And for masonry structures, the code is, I think, much simpler than reinforced concrete one, for sure. They only look for the area of the walls and the directions. And sometimes they use simple Excel spreadsheets, where is the mass center and the stiffness center. So if the mass center and stiffness center are almost at the same location, those structures survive. But and also there is something about openings, like in the masonry structure, if you have a large opening, it can create a problem to you. So these are the things that I can talk about the masonry structures.
Yeah, but sir, some slightly second part of like this question, I'm connecting with other question. Like this masonry buildings, are they recommended in zone 5? That is only masonry buildings can we recommend in zone 5 if they are low rise kind of building?
Yeah, so very clearly plain masonry will not survive in high seismic regions. Unreinforced masonry, it has to be reinforced masonry. Now classical reinforced masonry is one which says you will put bars through the walls. That is a classical reinforced masonry. That will take some time because now bricks have to change their design and they have to go that. You can use that with the cement blocks in which we can provide the openings for passing the reinforcement bars. But what is being also encouraged now in high seismic regions as far as masonry is concerned is confined masonry. So the Indian standard, which is getting revised now, IAS 1893, 13920, 13935, you will see that we have come up with a proposal in which, as I said before, we will limit the structural systems that can be used in the high seismic regions. And 2 recommendations for high seismic regions will be confined masonry as well as reinforced masonry.
Okay, sir. Thank you. And I think we are at the end, but there is one very interesting question. I'm not resisting myself to read that, and it is pointed to you only, sir, Professor Murthy, sir. I'm not reading name also, and I understand that this is asked by a student. So is it possible to construct the house in air?
In air?
Air, by converting all the mechanical energy at the bottom of the building to electrical energy, also using an anti-gravity concept?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a very, very interesting question.
Yeah, so answer is yes, we can construct, but only one of them, and that to research product, and then that to a lot of people across the world will come and see that this is a fashion item. It is not a regular life and living kind of a story. This magnetic levitation that one is talking about, we can't afford that luxury for normal buildings and houses. So while the question is a very happy question, the answer is very simple. You can do this for excitement in a college day environment, but when it comes to real life, you have to be grounded and your feet should be on the ground as far as the buildings and structures are concerned. Thank you.
And especially, I would like to add here that our environment, structures and structural engineers when people are looking at the structural cost, they want the cheapest structure and in the lowest cost framework. So such projects can be fanciful and castles in the air, but will have tremendous cost when implemented.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Now I thank all the panelists. So before I hand over the speaker or the stage to Sri Alok Bhaumik ji, immediate past president, like I would like to say that we have answered, means all the panelists have answered 31 questions, but still 126 to go in the question answer window and around 50 to go in the chat window. So like I say, somehow we'll try to send these questions to panelists and hope we get answers, and then maybe in this forum or in another forum, we'll give the answers. So now I request Sri Alok Bhaumik ji to give summary, conclusions, and also say vote of thanks.
Thank you, Professor Pradeep, for such an excellent panel discussion on a very important topic of Turkey earthquake. Before I get into the summary of what we discussed today, let me at the outset wish all of you a very happy Holi. Today is a happy Holi day in some of the regions. In some of the regions we are celebrating tomorrow, but today is a Choti Diwali Choti Holi for many. Secondly, on behalf of Indian Association of Structural Engineers, let me express our deepest sympathies for the families of those who lost their lives in Turkey or who suffered injuries. We are well aware that the damages have been pretty widespread. More than 14 million people are living in that area, covering, I think, about 11 provinces. We offer our support and solidarity for all of those. We are little heartened by India's and international community's response to this tragedy. India was among the first few countries who rushed emergency medical aid, as well as the rescue team to the region. Operation Dost has demonstrated how important it is to bring our greater cohesion and international responses to a disaster. With this initial remarks, now let me come to the summarizing today's webinar. Firstly, my sincere thanks to Professor Alp for agreeing to share information and wisdom about this Turkey earthquake. And also thanks to all the panelists for chipping in their excellent thoughts and insights. After a pretty long time, we have had such an excellent interactive panel discussion. Special thanks to Professor Pradeep, Director CBRI, for such an excellent moderation. There are many lessons which we have seen today, learned from Turkey earthquake, and also from the insights from our Indian panelists. There is if you go to NDMA website, you will see that there is Prime Minister of India's 10-point agenda on disaster risk reduction. And one of the points I just want to highlight of this 10-point program NDMA for disaster risk reduction is make use of every opportunity to learn from disasters, and to achieve that there must be studies on the lessons after every disaster. So I think this webinar is in line with this charter of 10-point program. Now let me come to the lecture from Professor Alp. And also I would like to quote the preliminary reconnaissance report, which is in public domain, which Professor Tandon mentioned in his remarks. So the first lesson which we need to learn is the use of digital technology in data collection from the disaster, which of course Professor Alp did not highlight in his presentation, but if you go to the preliminary report, you will see that in such a short time of 15 days, METU came out with this preliminary reconnaissance report, which is so exhaustive that one wonders how in such a short period of 15 days, so much of data, so many photographs were not only collected, the data analyzed, the data quality was, a lot of data was unused data. So it was a quality check, and all this done in just 15 days time. You can imagine how effectively it was done using mobile app data collection. And I think I'm not very sure how in India we are prepared, how prepared we are to collect this kind of data when the rehabilitation is going on in the first 48 hours, or let's say 72 hours. At that point in time, collecting this kind of technical information, photographs, and also collating them, taking the data, analyzing them, and coming out with report in 15 days. I think a lot to learn from this, positive learning. The second thing also, which Professor Alp did not elaborate much because we only had given him 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but it is there in that preliminary report, is the emergency response system, which did not perform satisfactorily in Turkey earthquake. In the worst disasters where 2 earthquakes happened within a gap of 9 hours, there was all the lifelines were cut off. There was no electricity, there was no gas, there was, the highway was not functioning, the gasoline was not there, and it was a sub-zero temperature. Imagine what would have happened. The survivors spent more than 50 hours in their car or in open without anything. And this kind of, situation can happen in India also if similar disasters happens. How prepared we are, what kind of psycho-social needs of the affected people in the region are to be addressed. These are issues, I think, which NDMA needs to really, these are not engineering issues, but I think very important issues which we need to discuss in NDMA and come out with some solutions. Coming to the structural engineering and the seismic science, the third lesson, the ground motion data, which has indicated that the earthquake demands were much higher than expected, particularly as Professor Alp mentioned, not in the short period range, but in the medium period range, the actually peak ground accelerations as well as PGV was much higher. And also one more thing is the vertical seismic was much higher, though it was a strike slip kind of a fault zone. And I'm sure, as Professor Alp mentioned, we will revisit their codes on earthquake and upgrade the same. And we will look forward to those revised codal provisions, which may also influence us. Now, coming to the structures and the geotechnics, there was a lot of deliberation on the soil condition induced seismic demands. I liked very much one of the topic in that preliminary reconnaissance report, where there was a matrix of good soil and good structure, good soil, bad structure, bad soil, good structure, and bad soil, bad structure comparison, and showing all the 4 photographs of structures where all these 4 types could be demonstrated in this Turkey earthquake. Excellent one, And also one more thing, conclusively proved that, in Turkey, the codes have been modified after 2000. So while they classified the damages, they classified separately for pre-2000 building and post-2000 buildings. And it was very conclusively proved that the pre-2000 buildings performed poorly as compared to the post-2000 buildings, which demonstrates that, the increased forces or increased demand for quality construction and ductility helped in the earthquake-resistant performance. Also about hospitals, I think Professor Alp mentioned that isolated hospital building showed good performance. Bridges performed well. Some of the historic structures also got damaged in the earthquake. RE wall performed better than other retaining walls. So these are things which we have learned from Turkey. What is the way forward for us? As far as seismic resilience and safety is concerned, as some of the panelists mentioned, that we have made tremendous progress after the Bhuj earthquake of 2001 in upgrading our codes and standards. And I think the second round of improvement in our codes are about to come. Many of us are aware about it, and that is another leapfrog jump, I think, in the codes and standards. However, I think there is a need to address some of the other issues other than the codes. That is upgrading our quality of construction, making sure that there is some techno-legal regime in our country, that is the licensing and enforcement, making sure that the codes are understood by the most of the people who are actually designers and it is implemented, compliance to the code. That is one area where I think there is a lot to learn. So broadly, these are the things which I thought are issues which we need to sort of address. That's all from my end. And I once again thank all the panelists, particularly Professor Dr. Alp, who has agreed to share his experience and his knowledge about the Turkey earthquake, and which has helped us to have such a lively interaction. Over to you, Professor Pradeep. You're on mute, Professor.
Yeah, thank you, Alok sir. So now we are at the end of the 2-hour panel discussion. So let us all work together for saving lives in earthquake-prone areas. I request Shri Manoj Mittalji to give any closing thoughts.
I think it has already been done actually. So it was a live presentation and we had a lot of discussion today. So I think many of the questions were related to the structural engineering, how to design and how to read the code and all those things. That is okay, that we can do at any time. But I think today's focus was to learn from Turkey what happened there and what we can learn from them and how we should prepare ourselves. And I think we need to do a lot of things and Herculean tasks actually, and but we should be more committed. And I think at present we are doing something, but we need to do more. In my view, our pace is very slow, and if some earthquake will come like Turkey in India, I think we will be almost in a similar situation actually. So we need to do more, and definitely we in the association will do our best, whatever we can do. And that's all from my side. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. So now we are at the end of the session. So we'll close. Just wanted to tell Professor Al that Holi is a festival of colors in the country. So I wish all a happy Holi. So before we leave this platform.
Happy Holi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Holi, everyone. Thank you.
Happy Holi.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.